At -30 degrees Celsius, when even the air felt sharp enough to cut through skin, a retired war veteran sat alone in his cabin, broken, forgotten, and ready to give up on the world. But that night, through the howling storm, he heard a faint cry, a desperate, trembling sound that pulled him to the door. What he found buried in the snow would change his life forever. A German shepherd, half frozen, eyes filled with pain and pleading for help. The man hesitated for a moment, not knowing that letting this dog inside would awaken the soldier within him once more. The wind screamed across the Alaskan tundra, carrying shards of ice that cut through the dark like glass. The thermometer on the cabin wall read -30 degrees Celsius. Inside, David Miller, a retired Army veteran, sat alone beside a flickering wood stove, the orange light dancing over metals lined with dust. Each crack of the fire sounded like an echo from his past. He hadn't spoken to anyone in days. Only the cold kept him company. Outside, the storm howled without mercy. Then, through the endless rush of wind, came a sound so faint it could have been imagined, a whimper. David's head lifted. Another cry followed. Raw and desperate, he grabbed his flashlight, pulled on his coat, and opened the cabin door. A blast of icy air punched through the warmth. There, half buried in drifting snow, stood a German shepherd, trembling violently, his fur frozen stiff, eyes pleading through the darkness. For a moment, soldier and animal stared at each other, two survivors caught in the same storm. David knelt in the snow, voice cracking. "Easy, boy. It's okay." He extended his hand. The dog hesitated, then collapsed into his arms. The veteran lifted him gently and whispered, "You're safe now." The moment David stepped back inside, the warmth hit like a lifeline. He set the German shepherd beside the fire, quickly wrapping him in an old wool blanket. The dog trembled uncontrollably, his teeth chattering as melting snow dripped onto the wooden floor. David rushed to heat a bowl of water, his hands shaking, not from the cold, but from something deeper. It had been years since he'd cared for another living soul. "Come on, buddy," he murmured, sliding the bowl forward. "Drink." The shepherd sniffed, then lapped at the water greedily. David smiled faintly. "That's it. You're a fighter." As the firelight grew brighter, David noticed faded scars along the dog's legs. Long, thin marks that looked too deliberate to be from nature. Beneath the fur on his neck, a faint tattoo glimmered, a number, military style. David froze. "You've seen War II, haven't you?" He found some leftover stew and tore small pieces of meat into a plate. The dog ate silently, his eyes never leaving David's face. That night, David dozed off in his chair, the storm still raging outside. The shepherd lay by the door, alert, refusing to sleep, as if guarding the old man who had just saved him. Two soldiers, one human, one canine, finally safe, if only for a night. The storm showed no mercy. For 3 endless days, snow fell like ash, sealing David's cabin off from the rest of the world. But inside, something remarkable was happening. The silence that once haunted those wooden walls began to feel alive. The German shepherd, now stronger, followed David everywhere. When David rose to fetch wood, the dog trotted beside him. When he brewed coffee, the dog waited patiently by the stove. David finally gave him a name, Shadow. "Because you never leave my side," he said with a quiet smile. Shadow was unlike any stray. He understood commands, sat when told, stopped at a hand gesture, and always slept near the door, guarding it like a soldier on duty. David began to talk again, softly, at first, about his past, about the war, about the comrades who never made it home. Some nights, the nightmares returned, flashes of gunfire, sand, and blood. But this time, when he jolted awake, Shadow was there, resting his head on David's knee, grounding him in the present. Still, there was one thing David couldn't ignore. Every night, around the same hour, Shadow would stand by the window, staring into the woods, ears stiff, growling low. Something out there was unsettling him. And David was starting to feel it too. When the blizzard finally broke, the world outside looked like a sea of white silence. David stepped out cautiously, Shadow trotting ahead, nose to the ground, tail low and focused. The air was sharp enough to sting the lungs. They followed a narrow path behind the cabin, where the drifts were deep and untouched. Suddenly, Shadow stopped. He began digging frantically, paws slicing through the snow like blades. "Hey, what is it, boy?" David called, hurrying over. Within moments, Shadow uncovered a flash of blue fabric, half buried, frozen stiff. David brushed off the snow and froze. It was a torn police K9 vest, the letters barely visible. Police Unit 47, REX, his breath hitched. "Rex?" he whispered, glancing at the dog. The shepherd's ears twitched at the name. David rushed back inside and used his old military radio to contact the local sheriff. Within an hour, a patrol SUV arrived, lights flashing against the snow. The officer scanned the dog's neck, and the device beeped. "Sir, this dog isn't a stray," the deputy said softly. "He's K9 Officer Rex, missing for over a month. His handler was killed during a raid. We thought he was dead too." David looked down at Rex and saw the same pain in his eyes that lived in his own. 2 soldiers, both left behind. The police stayed for a few hours, filing reports and confirming what David already knew. Rex had been through hell. When they finally left, quiet returned to the cabin. But Rex's unease didn't fade. He paced near the door, hackles raised, every sense alert. That night, just before dawn, the wind shifted, carrying something unfamiliar. Rex froze, ears forward, body rigid. A low growl rumbled from his chest. David, half asleep, reached for his flashlight. "What is it, boy?" Before he could stand, a sharp crack split the air, a gunshot. The window shattered, spraying glass across the room. David dove to the floor as another shot echoed. "Get down," he yelled instinctively. Though Rex was already moving, the shepherd bolted out through the broken door, barking furiously into the dark. Through the swirling snow, David saw a shadow running toward the trees, a man with a rifle. Another shot fired, but Rex was faster. He lunged, tackling the intruder into the snow. By the time the police returned, the gunman was on his knees, disarmed, face pale with terror. Detective Harris looked at David. "That's him, one of the men who killed Rex's handler." David glanced down at Rex, panting, wounded but standing tall. "Good boy," he whispered. "You finished what you started." Days later, the snow began to melt, revealing a world that finally seemed calm again. The gunman's arrest made headlines, and Rex was hailed as a hero who had not only survived, but finished the mission his handler never could. David watched the news from his worn-out armchair. Rex resting quietly at his feet, a fresh bandage wrapped around his leg. Every time the veteran looked at him, he saw more than a dog. He saw courage, loyalty, and something he thought he'd lost forever: purpose. When the police department arrived to take Rex back, David's heart clenched. "He's a hero," the officer said. "But he belongs to us now." David nodded slowly. "I understand," he whispered. But as he turned away, Rex whimpered, a deep, aching sound that froze everyone in the room. The officer hesitated. "You know, he hasn't bonded with anyone since his handler died." Weeks later, a letter arrived. The department had officially retired Rex from service and granted David permission to keep him. That evening, David stood outside the cabin, the northern sky blazing with color. Rex sat beside him, tail gently wagging. David smiled, placing a hand on his head. "You came to me for shelter that night," he said softly. "But maybe I was the one who needed saving." As the camera panned out, the storm clouds cleared, revealing 2 silhouettes walking side by side into the endless white.